super soon.
Yeah, I know, I just saw that. Whatever. Cool. All right, welcome back, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you.
Today is our 4th session. Right. And like we've been doing for our past couple of sessions, could you give me a rating on 1 to 5 of how you're feeling today? 1 being not so good, 5 being better?
Maybe like a 3.
Okay. Right. Is there anything in specific that led to that 3?
No, I'm just maybe feeling a little bit tired today.
Okay. All right. I remember last week you rated about a 4 and you also said you were a little tired, so do you remember any changes from this week to last?
No, maybe I'm just like a little bit restless at night.
Okay. How has your sleeping been?
Yeah, I'm relying heavily on sleeping pills still, so.
Okay. And how about those muscle relaxers? Have you been using those at all?
Yes.
Okay. How often have you been mixing them?
A couple of times a week, depending on how I feel.
Okay. Right. Have you noticed any change in how frequently you want to take those muscle relaxers too?
No, well, sometimes I need to take more than other times, but nothing too drastic.
Okay. All right. Have you spoken with John recently?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. When was the most recent time?
Yesterday actually.
All right. And what did you guys talk about, if you don't mind me asking?
I mean, he was just checking in to see, how I was doing with my therapy and, how my drinking was going, and so, yeah.
Any memorable bits from that conversation?
Well, I'm still a little bit hesitant about stopping the drinking. I really want to do it for him, but I just feel like I'm not at that point yet.
Mm-hmm. Has he been kind of saying the same things to you about trying to get you to stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, he's like, you've been doing it for a while now. I would assume that you would be able to start stopping now, but.
Got it. Okay. Have you talked to him about maybe coming in as well to one of your sessions?
I didn't bring that up, but that would be an option.
Okay. All right. So what I have planned for today is to complete what is called a genogram. It sounds fancier than it is. It's basically a family tree, so that'll help give us a little bit of a breakdown of what your family history looks like and maybe how the different relationships in your family affect you.
Okay.
So let's go ahead. Let me give you a copy of this. This looks a little more complicated than it should be. It's basically an outline of the different symbols that we're going to be using to complete our family tree.
Okay.
So let me know if you have any questions about that as we go along. Feel free to stop me and we can go ahead and work on that.
Okay.
So let's start with you in the very middle. Make sure I don't mix up the symbols myself. Okay. And you mentioned you are 50 years old?
Yes, 50.
Right. And, all right, what is your mother's name?
My mother's name is Carolyn.
Okay. And what is her age?
She's 75.
Okay. And your father's name?
Jimmy.
Okay. And his age?
77.
Okay. And are they together or separated?
They're together.
Okay. And when was the last time you spoke with them?
It's been a while. We kind of don't have that great of communication.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a couple months or so.
Okay. Would you say that they're more of a distant relationship to you now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. And I know last session we discussed a little bit about your younger brother, but I don't quite recall his name.
His name is Jason.
Jason, okay. And Jason is about 40, I think you mentioned?
Yes,
Okay. And do you have any other siblings? I think you mentioned a third brother.
Yeah, I do have a second brother, Derek.
Derek, okay. About how old is he?
He's 47.
Okay. And how was your relationship with Jason?
Well, we used to be really close. We used to spend a lot of time together, but not so much anymore. He got married, so we're kind of, we don't kind of speak anymore.
That's right. I remember you discussing his wife and how you don't really
Yeah.
get along too well with her.
Right.
Got it. And what was her name?
Allison.
Allison. Okay. Right. And is she about the same age as Jason, give or take?
Yeah, probably early 40s, somewhere in there.
Got it. Right. So you mentioned that. It's a little bit of a conflict between you and Allison. So with you and Jason, the conflict is kind of around his relationship with Allison?
Yes,
Got it. Okay. And your brother, Derek, does he have a partner?
No, not right now.
Okay. And how's your relationship with him in general?
It's okay. It's a little bit rocky. He does have a drinking problem himself, so
Okay.
yeah. So I kind of try to keep my distance from that.
Got it. I remember you mentioning previously as well that Derek is the one that you started drinking with when you were around 13?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he's still been kind of drinking since that age as well?
Yes.
Okay. How frequently do you see Derek?
You know, just we don't really connect anymore, just for the holidays.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And, okay, so your son's name is John.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And your ex-husband's name?
It's Jeffrey.
Jeffrey. Okay. And I know you have been separated for a couple of years now.
Mhm.
Is the divorce finalized?
It is.
Okay. Yeah, just making sure. And his new partner, what is her name?
Diane.
Diane. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had any contact with them since our past couple of sessions?
No.
Okay. Okay. And do you have any cousins or people that you were close to previously in your childhood?
Yeah, I have 2 cousins.
Okay. On your mom's side or dad's side?
Mom's side.
Okay. And is it from your mother's brother or sister?
From my mother's sister.
Okay. And what is your cousin's name?
Jessica.
Jessica. Okay. And how close are you to Jessica?
We're actually, pretty close. Yeah, I mean, as of late, I haven't really been talking to any of my family members, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably be closest to her.
Okay.
So.
And is she approximately your age, or?
Yeah, she's a little bit younger than me.
Got
She's
it.
48.
Okay. And when was the last time you spoke with Jessica?
About a month ago.
Okay. And typically, what do you talk about when you speak with Jessica?
We just kind of catch up. She's also a teacher, so we talk about that.
Okay. Does she live nearby, or is it mostly over the phone that you speak?
Yeah,
with her?
over the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, she lives out of the state.
Okay. And do you remember Jessica's parents?
Yeah. So it's David and Jennifer.
Okay. Right. And Jennifer was your mother's sister?
Right.
Got it. Okay. Do you remember any cousins on your father's side?
I didn't really ever meet them. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it seems like you've got a couple of different connections through your family, but nothing really too solid from what you're describing. You mentioned that you haven't really spoken with anyone recently. Has that been within the past couple of months, or could you give me a time frame?
Yeah, maybe like the last 6 months or so.
Okay. And you mentioned that might be tied to your drinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of pretty exhausting because I guess maybe my son tells them that I'm drinking a lot, and so it comes up, and I just kind of don't want to talk about that.
Got it. Okay. Do you know if John has any contact with Jessica?
I'm sure he does, yeah,
Okay.
maybe through.
Got it. So you're concerned that he's telling them about your drinking. Do you know what he might be telling them specifically?
Well, I think that he might exaggerate the amount sometimes, and so then it just like looks really bad and on me, and
Got it.
that I'm just being a bad mom or something.
Okay. And when we talked about Derek last time as well, you mentioned that he was kind of the heavy drinker that your parents tend to focus on in terms of
Mhm.
he's the one that drinks more.
Right.
Got it, okay. Do either of your parents have any issues with drinking? Okay. Right. And do you remember any other family members having any sort of drinking issues or strange behaviors?
I don't think so. I mean, my dad did drink, but
Okay.
it wasn't like out of control or anything like that.
Okay.
It was just, occasionally.
Okay. Do you remember how frequently, give or take?
Maybe a couple of times a week, but not excessive. I don't think I ever saw him intoxicated or anything like that.
Got it. Okay. So you don't remember any different behaviors when he was
No.
drinking?
No.
Okay. And back to you and Derek, you mentioned that you started drinking when you were about 13. Do you remember what that setting looked like or where you were at the time with him?
Yeah, there was a park by our house, and we would just go there after school or.
Okay. Did your brother Jason know about that?
I mean, eventually he did, but he was younger, so he kind of stayed out of that.
Okay. And do you remember if Jessica was aware of that situation too when you guys were that age?
Yeah, she was completely against it. She was really focused on school, even through high school and further on.
Okay.
So I don't even think that she drinks now, so.
Okay. Got it. So did any of your other family members, your aunts or uncles, find out about you and Derek going out?
I mean, maybe if Jessica said something, but they never just caught us or anything like that.
Okay. So you don't remember getting in trouble or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
My parents were pretty lenient on us as kids, so it just kind of happened that way.
Okay. And you mentioned now they kind of have a more difficult relationship with Derek as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And specifically as a result of his drinking?
I don't think so, yeah.
Do you remember when that relationship started to go a little sour?
It's been a while now, maybe a couple years.
Okay.
He went through a divorce because of all of that, and
Got it.
lost custody of his kids and things. So.
Okay. Have you had any contact with his kids or his ex-wife?
No.
Okay. All right. And with Jason specifically, do you know how he's been getting along with your parents?
Oh, he's the favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they talk every day,
Okay.
see each other regularly, so.
Okay. And how does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, at first I was kind of angry about it, but now I just kind of let it go.
Okay. And what made you upset about it at first?
Because I was the closest with my parents at one time, and we'd talk every day, and I'd go visit, we'd have dinner, things like that, but.
Okay. And when would you say that things started to change between you and your parents?
Within the last year or so.
Okay.
So,
All right. And your relationship with John, I know we've been on and off about that, trying to solidify what he thinks about you specifically. So was it also within the past year that you guys have had more conflict?
Yeah, I think so. Now that he's moved away, I feel like that he feels like that he can tell me these things.
Okay. Got it. So he didn't really express his issues with your drinking, and so he left the home?
Right, not so much, because he did, but I would get angry, so he'd kind of just let it go.
Got it.
Yeah. He didn't like it when I would yell or get upset, so.
Okay. And John is your only child?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. All right, so it seems like we've got a couple little triangles going on.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is that some of your relationships tend to be contingent upon their relationships with other people. Like, for example, your relationship with Jason has been a little bit more distant due to his relationship with his wife.
Okay.
So that might be something that is causing you difficulty to have conversations with him and communicate with him about these situations. But that's something we can definitely get into at another time. I just wanted to get a general picture of what your general family tree looks like.
Okay.
So also what I'm seeing is that you've only identified Derek as really having a serious drinking problem besides what John has been describing from yourself.
Mhm.
So there's no real pattern or track from where this drinking problem may have originated from.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to pinpoint and maybe find out a little bit more on, especially from when you started drinking with Derek at such a young age. Do you remember feeling anything specific when you would be going out with him or when you're drinking at about that age?
I mean, at that age, it kind of just felt like I was just had extra freedom, you know.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
Because you mentioned your parents were more lenient?
Right.
Okay. Did they have any specific rules about drinking, or did they just kind of
I don't think they even ever really talked about drinking per se. They didn't necessarily know that we were over there drinking.
Okay.
So as long as we were home by a certain time, they didn't really
Got
keep
it.
tabs on us. Yeah.
Okay. And were you always meeting that curfew?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys have any other discipline issues or any other kind of problems in the house otherwise?
No.
Okay.
I mean, a couple times, my brother would throw a party when my parents were away, but and then would get in trouble. But it was never like centered around the drinking or anything like that.
Okay. All right. Were there any other people involved or any friends that would come with you to go drinking?
Yeah, a couple of my friends and then a couple of my brothers.
Okay. Do you still have any contact with those people?
No.
Okay. All right. I think this is definitely a good place to start so we can help identify your different connections right now. And, all right, let's move from family to friends. I know that in our first session, we discussed that you did have a friend that was really close to you, but she moved away.
Mhm.
Have you still kept in touch with her?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Okay. And how long have you known her?
I'd say about 5 years now.
And remind me of her name again?
Anne.
Anne. That's right. Okay. And she was also a teacher with you?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And your current coworkers, I know that they've been being catty lately from what you've been describing. Have you had any other issues with them within the past couple of weeks?
Well, I think that they might be judging me on my job performance.
Okay. Could you elaborate on that performance?
We had like our quarterly review, and I didn't do as well as I probably should have.
Okay.
So, you know, I feel like they might just have a bad opinion about me,
Got it.
my work ethic.
Okay. And what were some of your previous quarterly reviews results?
I mean, I always had pretty consistent, you know, reviews, but for some reason this time something just went wrong. I don't think it was anything with me. It might have been like the observer.
Okay. All right. So is it someone that comes to observe you in class?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you remember any specific notes that they left for you on that review?
They stated that they thought my thoughts were kind of scattered and I wasn't able to maintain the classroom as well as I had in the past.
Okay. And have you been feeling that your thoughts have been scattered, or do you think that that's just what they were observing?
I mean, I was probably just tired that day. They just caught me on a bad day.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned these are quarterly observations that occur
Mhm.
regularly? Okay. Did they give you any feedback in terms of what you might do to improve on that score that they gave you?
They just wanted me to make sure that I had my curriculum down and I was able to be prepared for the class when the material.
Got it. Okay. And in terms of that, did they have any comments on how the kids were responding to you?
Yeah, they were kind of, you know, they were louder, a little bit more rambunctious than normal, so, they were thinking that maybe because I didn't have control of the classroom that I was allowing them to be that way all the time, but I don't think that they are that way normally.
Okay. So that just kind of seemed like an off day in the
Right,
long run.
right.
Got it.
And I don't want my coworkers to judge me for that, so.
Mhm. What were some of the things that your coworkers were saying to that effect?
They were saying, you know, that I was on the way out of the door, or that they were that it was possible that, you know, I could be fired, and, you know, I would pass by the break room and they would just laugh, and then I'd come in and then they'd just stop, so.
Okay, all right. So these are things you've overheard, they haven't really said them directly to you?
Right.
Okay. And that's even while considering you've had a prior pretty good record in terms of your reviews?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that you had parent-teacher conferences also last week, so it seemed kind of busy for you. Do you remember any specific things that happened during those conferences that stood out to you?
Well, a couple parents did mention that their kids said something about that I was giving a lot of homework and that I wasn't explaining the homework very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids were kind of unsure of what to do because I didn't adequately explain the homework, but.
Okay. And what grade is it that you teach again?
5th grade.
5th, okay. So could you give me some examples of a typical homework assignment that you've been giving them?
Yeah, so we just, I'd give them like a reading passage and they'd have to answer some questions over it.
Okay.
And then, or sometimes, we'll give them like an excerpt from the book and we'll just have to, reflect on that and elaborate, just write up a little report.
Okay. And how have they been responding to those assignments besides telling their parents that they're not quite sure? Like, have they been completing the assignments or?
They have. Probably not up to par as where they should be, but.
Okay. Have you noticed a change in their grades as per the past couple of weeks?
A little bit. They might have slipped a little bit.
Okay. And that's kind of in general with the whole class?
Just like a handful of the kids, yeah.
Okay.
That's why I'm thinking maybe it's just the parents or just the observer that.
Got it. Okay. All right, let's do a little bit of a shift back to your current drinking regimen. I know you mentioned that a couple weeks ago you were drinking about a 6-pack a night. Has that changed at all within the past few weeks?
No, that's about the same.
Okay. And you've also been having some budgeting issues as a result of having to buy those 6-packs.
Yeah.
Have you had any changes in your budget or in that kind of
No,
index?
I'm still feeling the strain, but.
Okay.
I did try to skip a day last week, but it didn't really work out as I thought it would.
Okay. For what reason were you trying to skip?
I just thought maybe it would be a nice time to try and cut down.
Okay. Do you remember where you were at that time? Were you at home when you thought about this, or?
Yeah, I was just at home.
Okay. Right. Had you spoken to John recently?
Yeah.
Okay. And so is it possible that something John said helped encourage you to make that skip? Okay. Do you remember what you talked about specifically?
He was just really concerned, and like I said, he mentioned this past conversation that we had yesterday, that he thought that I would already be making an effort to stop.
Okay.
He was kind of upset that it didn't work last week when I tried, so.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And do you have any concerns with maybe disappointing John or letting him down?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
I mean, he's my only child, and I don't want him to have an opinion of me that, I'm just like an alcoholic or something, or that, alcohol is controlling my life, and I'm not able to be an adequate parent for him. I mean, he's older, but I still want him to know that I'm there for him and able to provide for him if he needs it.
And it does sound like John is the one that tends to be directing most of these conversations. Have you heard things that John has been telling you from anyone else in your family?
I mean, my parents have mentioned it, but I think I mentioned this before, that my brother drinks more, so, they're kind of just like, well, you're not where your brother is yet, so as long as you don't become your brother.
So they've stated yet. Do you think they have concerns that you might end up where Derek is?
They might.
Okay. Right. Do you know if they've done anything to work with Derek, or have they kind of just pushed him away as a result?
They tried to get him into rehab a couple times,
Okay.
but he left before it was finished.
Okay.
So they kind of just, well, we tried to help you and you didn't take it, so.
Got it. Okay. And have you spoken to Derek about this situation, about maybe why he left rehab or how he feels about your parents?
I try not to talk to him about it too much because he also gets angry, and so I don't want to make that much of a conflict about it.
Got it. Okay. And do you have an estimate on maybe how much he drinks on a regular basis?
Well, he'll drink, the whole day.
Okay.
Got it. Various amounts, but
Okay.
that's what I always tell my parents, like, I only drink after work, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel yourself needing to drink more or being interested in drinking more?
Well, no, I don't want to mess up with my work ethic or
Okay.
do anything to harm my job, so.
Mm-hmm. And besides that quarterly review, do you remember having any negative comments as a result in the past couple weeks?
None other than the review.
Okay. Have you had any trouble getting to school or getting to work?
No, I just, like I said, I've been pretty tired, but I would never just like call into work or something.
Okay. Got it. And has there been a change in your diet recently or things that you've been having besides your alcohol? Okay. How about exercise? Have you been exercising recently?
No, I don't exercise.
Okay. Have you ever exercised in the past?
I have, yeah, just a little, running here and there, but nothing too strenuous.
All right. Okay. So it's definitely a good amount of information that we've covered today. Is there anything else that has come up in the past week that you want to go over?
Well, after my conversation with John yesterday, I did kind of have a thought that even though I'm kind of concerned that I'm not there for him now, what would it be like if he didn't have to deal with me and my drinking problem?
Okay. Could you elaborate what you mean by that?
Well, I just feel like sometimes I might be a burden on him. I don't want him to have to, stress like, mom's drinking again, or, I feel like I'm adding extra stress to his life, so.
Okay. Has he ever expressed a similar sentiment to that you might be stressing him out?
I mean, not blatantly like that, but.
Okay. And is this something that's recent in terms of your feelings about the situation, or has this been?
I mean, yeah, it came to my mind after the conversation yesterday and last week as well, so.
Okay. Have you been having any thoughts of self-harm recently?
No.
Okay. And in terms of you being a burden, what is it that you're thinking about doing to address that situation? Is that just something that's been in your head recently?
Yeah, and I don't really know how to go about it. Like, I want to do right by my son, but I also just don't want to stop drinking.
Okay.
I don't know if I can find it in myself to find a balance with that, but.
Okay. Right. And last week when you tried to skip that night of drinking, did you do anything else to maybe try and distract you from the situation, or how did that night play out?
Well, yeah, on the drive home, I was just thinking about it. Well, maybe I'll just not stop at the store today, and see how that goes, and, watch my shows and just go on with the night as usual, but, it was about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours into the night, and I had to leave, I had to go to the store.
Okay. Did you think about talking with anyone that night, or trying to make contact with maybe John or maybe your cousin?
Well, I thought if I called John and I told him that I felt like I wanted to drink, that he would just be disappointed in me, so,
Okay. Do you think that you would have someone in your family, maybe Jessica or someone else to talk to whenever you're feeling that way, that you're not sure about trying to switch that up?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably call Jessica, but I'm just like, I'd rather just do it on my own.
Okay. Have you ever spoken to her about your drinking?
Not necessarily
Okay.
trying to stop drinking or anything like that. So.
Okay. I know you mentioned that she doesn't drink at all.
Right.
Okay. And you do think that she might be aware of the situation as a result of John talking to her?
She might.
Okay. All right.
She hasn't reached out to me ever or
Okay.
anything though, so.
Yeah, that was my next question. Okay. Right. So besides last week, you mentioned that previously you've also tried to stop drinking as well. Do you remember how you were feeling around that time?
Well, I just feel really antsy if I try to stop.
Mhm.
You know, it's like a fight in my head, like, okay, this is something that you should probably do, but then at the same time, I don't want to feel that tightness in my chest that I just need to have a drink.
Got it. Okay. It sounds like it's really part of your evening routine, that it's just something that you're so accustomed to doing. Okay. Have you ever tried to break out of that routine in another sense? Like, I know you tend to come home after work and then stay home afterwards. Have you spent any nights out elsewhere or maybe at someone else's home?
No, not recently, no.
Okay. When was the last time you had just a general social outing or just going out?
Maybe in the last 6 months or so.
Okay. Right. Do you remember what happened during that event?
Yeah, it was my, one of my neighbors' wedding.
Okay.
And so, that was kind of difficult for me because I didn't want them to think that I had a drinking problem and there was an open bar there, so I didn't stay very long.
Got it, okay. So you felt that that open bar was kind of a challenge to you, in a sense? Okay. Because you're so used to your pattern from what it's describing that you tend to just go for alcohol since that's what you've been doing?
Right.
Got it, okay. Right. And you mentioned that you didn't want the people around you to think that you were an alcoholic specifically. Do you think that might be tied to why you tend to stay home recently?
I mean, I guess so. I just feel like that, you know, I don't want, just like with John, I try not to drink around him as much, but if I'm by myself, well then nobody's there, nobody's gonna judge me for the amount of alcohol, even though I don't feel like that it's that much.
Got it. Okay. All right. So based on that information, I kind of have a little bit of a challenge for you. So this next week, I think what might help you maybe switch up your routine a bit would be to get out of the house one night. You don't have to go anywhere in specific, but I think it would be a good change of environment to maybe do something else at night. Try and pick maybe a Friday when you don't have work the next morning so you don't have to worry about planning your assignments or doing grading. But maybe going out to a coffee shop, maybe going out to see a movie, something different just to pull you out of that routine that you've been so ingrained in. That might help maybe distract you and maybe think about the different things that you're feeling at that time. So that will definitely be, I'll call it your homework assignment for this week. But pick something fun. Don't go to a museum if you don't like museums, because I can understand that. All right. So just want to make sure that we covered everything in that family tree that we've gone over. Do you remember having any other close relationships with any cousins or any friends specifically? I know you mentioned Jessica, but was there anyone else that was involved with you?
I did have a best friend.
Okay.
Her name was Vanessa.
Okay. And did she go with you and Derek drinking as well?
She did.
Okay. Have you had any contact with her recently?
She was actually killed in a car accident.
Oh. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, we were, it was when I was in college.
Okay. Were you present for that, or?
No.
Okay.
We went to separate schools, but.
Okay. And how did that situation affect you?
I mean, it hit me pretty hard. We were pretty close for a really long time, but.
Okay.
I guess sometimes I might feel guilty for drinking. Maybe that's why I stay at home, because she was killed by a drunk driver.
Got it, okay. And along those lines, have you ever driven while impaired or been inclined to do so?
No.
Okay. And this happened when you were in college?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, and were there any other friends that you had at the time that helped you through this situation, or did you feel like you were by yourself?
Yeah, I did kind of feel like I was alone in that.
Okay.
Yeah, I struggled for a little bit with that.
Okay. What were some of the things you did to try and cope with that situation?
I just really, focused on school and, tried to get through it. I did reach out to my cousin during this time, so she was helpful with that. She was supportive.
Got it, okay. And Jessica, that was?
Mhm.
Okay. Right. I didn't mean to bring such a low point towards the end of our session there, but is there anything else that you would like to cover about your family or anyone else that you remember in specific?
Not necessarily. I've been thinking that maybe it would be helpful to try to reach out to my parents, and see how that goes, but it goes back to the whole thing. I don't want them to have that opinion about me, and I don't want them to compare me to my brother, so.
It does seem that they're very focused on Derek's drinking specifically. Have they talked to you about Derek's drinking?
Yeah, they've brought it up and they wanted me to try to help with it, but I try to keep my distance with that just because.
Got it. Okay. And you said that you haven't really spoken to them too much within the past 6 months?
Right.
Okay. Do you know if there's any birthdays or anniversaries coming up?
Yeah, actually there's a birthday in 2 months, so
Okay.
we'll probably get together for that.
Okay. Is that typical for your family to get together for occasions like that?
For holidays or
Okay.
for occasions.
Okay. All right. And that's definitely something that we can look into next session for sure. In terms of that birthday party, maybe we can look into role-playing some of the conversations that you might have with your parents or with your brother if he's present, so we can work on maybe feeling out what that situation might look like and how you might want to address your drinking with them. So we'll consider that for next session. And yep, just as a reminder, again, your homework is to go out, go have fun, go do something different, go get some fresh air, do something completely out of your norm to try and see how that feels. And then if you don't mind, maybe jotting down some thoughts on how that experience made you feel. Were you uncomfortable? Were you happier? Did you think about something else throughout that period? And just bring that back. You don't have to write it down. Just be ready to let me know what that felt like.
Okay.
All right, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
I forgot what time it was, so I was like,